So, Myra, is this the deck that's replaced Underworld Breach in Modern?
Find out on battlechads.
Hello everybody and welcome to the next episode of Battlechads. I am Josh and I'm joined by my co-hosts Dan and Sam. Hi guys.
Hello.
Hi everyone.
And we've got a deck tech episode today and we've got the a member of a Worldly Council, Myra. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Hey guys, thanks for having me on and super excited.
Pleasure to have you on. Now, this sort of deck tech has come across or came to our attention because you've just qualified for the next RC with this deck, and that is Jeskai Ascendancy. Now, before we go into the actual deck tech and stuff, could you just tell us a bit about yourself, Myra? You know, a bit about your Magic background, a bit about your place on Team Worldly Council, and your sponsor, etc.
Sure. So hi guys, nice to meet you. I'm Messiah. I'm known as Myra or Myra00 on the Magic community. And I'm currently a 21-year-old med student that's also been grinding the Magic competitive scene since, I think, 2022. That's my first big event. And since then, I've been just purely grinding competitively, played in a Pro Tour, top 16 in one of the RCs, the European RC. Also, played in all of the RCs, or most of the RCs. And my other accomplishments are winning the MIT Pioneer Open Season 1, some top 16s and top 8 in the European Opens, the Legacy Opens, and yeah, I'm currently testing with Team Worldly Council, and very luckily, like the three of you guys here, I'm sponsored by UltraPRO, and I rep their products while testing with Worldly Council and aiming for the PT.
Amazing. I tell you what, there's some achievement, going, your Magic accolades are really impressive, but the fact that you're studying for, to be I guess a doctor, is that right?
Yeah.
That's incredible. That's hard work right there and balance. I'd be interested to maybe later on in the pod talk about how you balance those two.
Yeah, absolutely. Like today I just came back from the library studying about the, human anatomy. And then now I'm, at home trying to grind some events and writing some guides. So it's, quite busy, but it's a lot of fun and I really enjoy it. So yeah, happy to chat about that.
Amazing. So Dan, you're gonna have how we run this. Dan's gonna have the deck list up, so those who are watching on YouTube can actually see the deck list. But those who are listening only, we will provide the deck list in the comments. In the show notes. But any key cards, we will speak out. Lads, have you got anything to add, or you want to ask Myra before we actually move on to initially introducing the deck?
Well, from myself personally, Myra, the last time we met, it was actually face-to-face in RC Bologna, wasn't it? Do you want to tell everyone how that went?
Yeah, so as far as I recall, it was like, I think we were both like 4-2 or something, or was it like 3-2?
Yeah,
like
4-2.
We're gonna lose another match. We're playing kind of for day 2, and then I was like chatting with you like earlier in the day, like seeing how you went, your first RC, and then we actually parent each other. And actually, the second I saw your deck list, you on the Omni deck and myself on the Jeskai Shiko deck, I'm like, oh no, not a third Omni. And I thought I was like gonna lose for sure, but luckily I came out ahead, and I went to day 2 and sorry, I had to knock you out of day 1 contention. Team family kill.
It's okay. It's okay. At the time, I was like, it's okay. They're just a very good Magic player, but it also turns out that you're very good outside of Magic as well, Myra, with that medical stuff. So now I'm actually very jealous. So I'm just going to sit in the corner here for the rest of the episode and be quiet. But no, it's good to have you on. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you again.
Dan's just looking at like, oh, Corey Steelcutter, and then like, wait, where's
got
the
love hearts in my eyes? That's all. Just Corey Steel Cutter and Galvanic Blast, that's it.
So Corey, so Jeskai Ascendancy, Myra, can you just tell us the it is a mid-range combo deck? Would you agree?
Yeah, I would say this deck, besides it being super new, it's very, very rare that we see like it is a mid-range combo deck, as in like we have like ways to play fair with like Corey, with Narset, with the Sagas, as well as a combo finish. But I would say it's rare because it's a aggressively slanted mid-range deck / combo deck, and aggro and combo like being, as a hybrid together is not something we see very often. Like the last time I recall that something like that was good in Modern was like, I don't know, Hammer Time. So like, yeah, it's a very interesting for sure and very rare type of deck, and it just kind of fits my playstyle. So I've been rocking it in a few events. I actually haven't been playing like tons of it like I would like to, since I'm so busy with uni, but within the small amount of grinding I've done with this deck, I've actually done pretty well. So happy to show you the ways.
Could you just go into what the actual combo is then? Just tell us what the combo is, and I'm pretty sure Sam's going to have a follow-up question because he's very interested to see where this deck is placed in Modern and what this actually deck has potentially replaced.
Sure. So essentially, like the combo finish of this deck is that Jeskai Ascendancy, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you untap all your creatures, and those creatures get +1/+1. And then there's the second trigger of whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you loot, or you may loot. And essentially what this does is that with Emery in play, unlike unsummoning sick Emery in play, every time you tap to target a artifact and you cast that artifact, it untaps and buffs all your creatures. So with that, you basically try and loop Emery to like casting 0 drops over and over again. And with that, you can either get infinite mana, a lot of cards with the loot, and just a super, super big creatures. And the strong thing about this combo is that, unlike before where you had to have Emery, survive a turn, with Corey Steelcutter, it gives the Emery haste. So you can basically equip the Corey to a newly played Emery and just start going off from there. And basically all you need is an Emery, Ascendancy, and just some number of 0 drops. Like preferably you would want like a Mox, the same Mox you have in play. So you can then like legend rule and you don't need to sack the 0 drop to have it in your graveyard and stuff. But you can also like go off with Mishra's Bauble. You can also like, after making a lot of mana, you can just like cast like the 1 drops, the 2 drops as well. So yeah, it's quite, there's quite a lot of lines to this deck, which I really like.
Just one of them there that you mentioned with Corey's Steelcutter, giving a creature haste, more specifically your Emery. That's something that I didn't even think about in this deck. I just thought that the Corey Steelcutter was in there because it's just sort of like a new card and it's just really, really good in Modern at the minute. So sort of as like a plan B, if you will, but which I'm assuming is the main purpose of the card anyway. But then having the option to equip your Corey to an Emery to then just combo in the same turn just seems insane.
Yeah.
Turns out Corey Steelcutter is a playable Magic card. Who would have guessed it by
Spoilers.
this point in almost every format? Yeah. One thing I'm dying to ask, and I know you're going to have a good answer for me, because I've been spending a lot of time online, surprise to no one. And obviously a lot of Magic players do this thing where they're like, they lose to it in FNM and it needs to be banned. But with this deck in particular, obviously the last Tamiyo, Emery, Mox Opal, Mox Amber deck that we saw was Underworld Breach, which is, to the surprise of no one, got banned earlier in the year. So the question after that happened was, well, what's going to be the next best Emery, Mox Amber, Mox Opal, Tamiyo deck? Is this replacing the void of Underworld Breach, or is it just completely different?
Yeah, so I would say it's similar. like this deck is very similar to Breach post board in that it gets to like Breach used to be able to play like a combo game or a fair game, or like play a fair game while threatening a combo, and get to pick and choose like which avenue to attack. And this deck is very similar to that. So in a way, yes, but I wouldn't say this deck is like Breach or like Breach level. I would say it's clearly a notch below. Like Breach was just insane because it's like not only was it 1 mana less, it didn't need to just survive for you to go off. Like even just playing a Breach for value, just immediately casting an Emery, immediately casting a Narset, immediately like escaping baubles, like that was good enough for Breach. Whereas Ascendancy, when you suspect your opponent has things like Wear and Tear, Thraben Charm, it is a liability. So in that sense, it's not like as strong as Breach, of course. But like you said, the Narset, the Tameo, the Moxes, that core of the deck is like similar to Breach, and it's also the reason to play this deck. So in that sense, yes, it's a deck that utilizes the shell that's very powerful. And I really don't want to get into the ban talks yet, because one, it's a new deck that just came out, so there's a lot of innovating to do. I'd say a lot of the wins I'm getting, some of it's from like my opponents not knowing how to sideboard against it. So as the format matures, as the deck matures, there's gonna be some ups and downs the deck will experience, and then I would like to see if this deck is really Breach or not.
I've noticed that one of the premier counter spells in Modern at the moment is Spell Snare, and this is like pretty immune to Spell Snare. It's like apart from your Corey Steelcutters, I don't think you've got any 2-drops in this main board that I can see.
Yeah, Spell Snare is really not very like scary at all, and yeah, there's not a lot of like blue decks I'm very scared of, so it's a plus for sure.
Cool. So I think that's a good way to talk about the actual contents of the deck. Obviously, any tips and tricks that come across, we've already spoke about a couple then, that come across during as we go through the cards, feel free to just mention them. So we mentioned Emery, Lurk of the Lock. Everyone knows what that card is. It's one of the key enablers to sort of affinity decks. It was one of the key enablers in the Breach deck. Obviously, everyone knows about Tameo now. Tameo is an excellent card. This deck cycles through your deck, so you can quite easily flip Tameo. I would imagine. But there is a card in the creature package. Just plays 11 creatures in your list. Narset. Sorry, I can't even. We thought we joked about me not being able to pronounce cards before, and just went and did it again. Narset, Jeskai Waymaster. Which reads, at the beginning of your end step, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw cards equal to the number of spells you've cast this turn. Tell me about this card. Yeah,
so Narset is, I would like, as much as we call it Jeskai Ascendancy because of like Ascendancy being the combo kill, I'll actually like call this deck Jeskai Narset because that's like it's the core of the deck, enabling us both setting up for our combo, like digging towards Ascendancy, digging towards Emery, but also like enables us to play fair with Corey Steelcutter and Saga and go fair and control or aggro with the advantage we gain from Narset. But essentially, this deck kind of plays like a Stormy Prowess deck in that like we'll just spam a lot of 0-drops and 1-drops, and even with like Repeal, we'll bounce those 0-drops back to our hand to then replay it. So it builds up like the Corey triggers, the Prowess triggers, and then with Narset in play, we essentially just cast a one-sided Time Twister every end step to just draw 4, draw 5, draw like 6 cards every turn. And that then keeps the chain of, continuing to grow our board, continuing to pull ahead, continuing to also like make our opponent deal with the board while threatening a combo. So it's very much the core of the deck. It's very flashy and it lives up to the hype, yeah.
It also can't be bolted and
It cannot
awkward
be
to fit or
bolted.
push.
Yeah,
Mhm.
very, very important at the minute with how much blue-red prowess is flying about there, packing 4 copies of Bolt. It definitely cannot be bolted.
Yeah, and what I remember, like, I think someone mentioned about since the deck digs so much, Tamiyo flips really fast. This deck can actually flip Tamiyo on turn 1 on the draw with like Tamiyo, a Mox, a repeal, and like another repeal or a cantripping artifact. You can easily just flip this turn 1 and then proceed to like ultimate on turn 4. I've done that against like Ponza decks that's on the play, destroyed all my lands from turn 1 to turn 4 and still lost because I just went, okay, turn 1 on the draw, Island, Tamiyo, Mox, repeal, flip Tamiyo, okay, you Stone Rain again, okay, plus, you Stone Rain again, plus, turn 4, ultimate, Mox, Ascendancy, Emery, equip Corey, just kill you like that. So, yeah, Tamiyo is very, very good in this deck. And just one little awkward thing is that Narset, it's a May trigger, but then Tamiyo is not a May trigger when you flip it. So there's a lot of time that you go like spam my board, like spam casting a lot of things, and one of them's Tamiyo. And then you go to your end step, you like draw 4 cards, and then that triggers Tamiyo to flip, but you flipped it on your end step, so you haven't plussed it. Like your opponent can like bolt it or attack it, which is a bit awkward, but like you're still drawing like 3-4 cards, so
yeah. It's still a planeswalker, an incremental, inconsequential planeswalker for 1 mana that's just been enabled by your game plan anyway, hasn't it? So
yeah.
you know, if it gets bolted, so be it. But you cycle through your deck so much, you're going to see another one. So that's sort of your creature package. Now we'll talk very briefly on the instants. So you've got 5 instants in this deck. You've got 1 Galvblast, but Galvblast, I'm presuming that's just generic removal. Just keep either a finisher or removal. Spell in your deck. You play a lot of artifacts, so it's often enough it's going to be 4 damage to wherever. But then repeal's really interesting because Sam, did you mention that traditionally the stock Jeskai Ascendancy lists play Metallic Rebuke, but obviously Myra, you've chosen to go all in on repeal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
so
Like, go on, Myra. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, so like the Galvblast, you're right in that it's like a generic removal spell that I get to play because I have all these artifacts. But also, I wanted a way to like be able to deal with the opposing Emeries since I'm playing against more mirror matches, and that portable hole is like a really bad way to, you know, because you can't like kill Emery at all, or like the Narset. So I wanted a way to interact with those creatures while also giving us like a way to catch up from when we're on the draw. Like this deck is very, 2 mana, 3 mana heavy, and like in the cards that we want to play to the board. So like I wanted a way to not fall behind. And also like with Tamiyo, right? Just having more variety of spells that you can buy back with the minus is just a good way to add resiliency to your deck building. Hence the Galvblast. And repeal is, I would say, the secret MVP of this deck, tying it together. Not only does it like bounce problematic permanents like, I don't know, Deafening Silence, or even just like a Johnny token when they're like threatening to flip it with bombardment, but also like the aforementioned bound like floating mana with Mox, bouncing the Mox, replaying the Mox to then like draw an extra card for free, playing 2 spells for free, so that's an extra prowess triggers and Corey tokens. And also just helping us build up that storm count with Narset. So it just does it all. It ties the deck together. It makes sure that we're able to properly combo through problematic permanents while also giving us enough fuel to keep triggering Corey and be aggressive. So yeah, Shadow MVP.
Was it the list that you were originally running, or the one that I seen like knocking about? It was running. Was it just like 1 or 2 copies of repeal across the 75? And just seeing that is now gone up to 4 copies of. It definitely speaks volumes as to how well this card's actually performed in this type of shell. just like 1 mana, bounce your Mox, draw a card, replay the Mox, and then you're drawing, what, 3 cards from Narset at the end phase then? Flip your Tameo, life's good when you're doing stuff like that.
Yeah, actually, I got this list actually from my fellow World League Council teammate and senpai, Andre Mengucci, who himself got the list through a American RCQ grinder, and he was the one that actually like tried with the 4 repeals, in which Mengu kept, and then I also kept, and repeals kind of being the core of the deck, whilst the card that's actually gone down a lot was the Metallic Rebuke. And I think Sam was very interested in why it's not played anymore, but essentially, like, with the Cories and with the Narset, you're kind of incentivized to hold on to 0 drops as much as you can to make sure you're able to trigger those cast trigger benefits. Whereas, like, Rebuke incentivizes you to play out artifacts to be able to have it open. So that's already like, you're losing out on triggers like that. And it's also very like face up to do. So, your opponent will play around it. But also, like, the problem with counter spells in general, especially ones that aren't easy to hold up, are like with Narset, and also to some degree, like with Corey wanting you to like play 2 spells on your turn to actually just attack, you basically churn through your deck by like playing out your hand. So, you play out your hand and like Rebuke in your hand. Yeah, it's good to interact, but that's just one less spell you've cast. And with Narset, like forcing you to discard it. If you draw into another Rebuke and you happen to be able to cast it, that might be good. But like it's a lot of uncertainty there. So I just felt that it didn't fit the game plan of, either wanting to play as a combo or play as a prowess deck. Hence I actually removed it.
I love that logic. I really love that logic.
Great. Really great. And it loops us back around to the beginning of the discussion where, well, this isn't, this is a combo aggro deck as you compared yourself to something like Hammer. And like, I think Magic players in general have a tough time stepping away from prescribed, solved, in quotation marks, 75s or 60s, where they're like, right, well, I'm going to play 2 Metallic Rebukes because everyone else is. And I really like the idea of stepping outside that bubble. Repeal looks, as Dan's already pointed out, Repeal looks crazy in this deck, but without the counter spells, all I can see is every turn this deck putting its best foot forward, not leaving a foot behind. And just how are you meant to keep up with a deck that's putting its best foot forward every turn? And even, sure, Metallic Rebuke can hit your opponent's counter spells, but like, there's not really anything you can counter here to disrupt a lot of what's going on. It's really smart and really well constructed, I think.
Yeah, like counter spells are typically like cards I'm not worried about, because like a lot of our deck, for example, like Narset, Tameo, also like Corey, like these cards, and Saga, of course, but like these cards are so cheap and generate so much value. So when like our blue, like opposing blue decks trying to interact with us through counter spells, they often either trade down on mana, trade down on tempo, or just can't counter these problematic permanents in time. So then, like, if I suspect my opponent has a counterspell and I have like Ascendancy I want to resolve, if I have like an Emery and Tameo in play, I just slow roll the Ascendancy until my opponent taps out for like a threat, or taps out to try and deal with the problematic permanents already in play. So like there's like the way I play around counterspells aren't with my own counterspells, but is by generating value and keeping my opponent on the back foot. It's kind of like the remand theory of like, remand is the card that's very good when the person casting remand is ahead, but it's very bad on the draw. And that's exactly what I want to do. I want to make my opponent's counterspell be bad, because they're already on the back foot. And yeah, so that's the theory behind not wanting the rebukes, not being scared of counterspells.
You're holding that trigger, aren't you? You got the trigger in your hand, and you're like, I'm just gonna wait. I'm just gonna wait, and then boom, there's the right moment. Pull that trigger, go. I like.
Yeah.
I like. Oh.
Yeah. So I have like one trigger here with the Ascendancy in play. I also have the other trigger here with the Tamios in play. I have another trigger underneath the table with the Saga about to pop off.
Yeah.
And it's just like that's the way I play the game with this deck.
Yeah. So we'll talk about the artifact package now, because you play in a suite of 23 artifacts.
Mm-hmm.
Notably, all of them bar Corey Steelcutter can be tutored with Urza Saga, but they're also either 0 mana, 1 mana, so you can cycle them through your deck quite easily, and then buy them back and pay for them with Emery. So we'll talk about sort of your inclusions. We spoke about Corey Steelcutter. We had an episode about Corey Steelcutter on the previous episode about Chad, so check that out if you haven't done that already. But you mentioned, we'll talk about the 0 mana artifacts a little bit now. So you've got Mistress Bauble, Mox Amber, Mox Opal. You're also playing, I guess, a copy of Tormod's Crypt. I suppose that's more utility rather than enabling your game package. But the 0 mana artifacts, you said before that you can trigger this combo with any 0 mana artifact. It doesn't have to be in the Team of Breach, you needed to get specifically Mox Amber or Mox Opal, but you can do this combo or your combo with Mistress Bauble and even the Tormod's Crypt. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, so you're right in that I have the Crypt more as a utility to fetch off of Saga. Previously, it was Soul Guide Lantern, but I'm also trying Tormod's Crypt since it's a 0-drop and it just enables the busted 3 0 mana artifacts on turn 1, enabling Metalcraft on Opal and then spamming the board that way. And there's upside and downside on Soul Guide Lantern and Crypt, but yeah, so for the combo, essentially you just need to have the 0-drop always go to the graveyard, so you can fetch it back up with Emery. And the way you do that with the Moxons is that you do that through the Legend rule. And then with Bauble and Crypt, you can sack itself to its ability, so that's not an issue there. The problem with Bauble is that if you look at the card, the sacrifice trigger, it forces you to draw. So if you're like, for some strange reason, if you don't kill your opponent through the combo, you might like die from the infinite triggers of Bauble. So it's a bit awkward there. But there's like corner case scenarios of like, oh, your opponent just happens to have a Chalice on 0, so it counters your Mistress Bauble, or with every casting of spells, non-creature spells with Ascendancy in play, it lets you loot. So you can just go, okay, I'll just basically loot through my whole deck to find the Moxons to generate mana, and then play the Corey to give my infinite power creatures trample, and then just kill you that way as well. That's the combo.
So amongst your artifacts, you've got a copy of Aethys Spellbomb. I'm presuming, again, utility. Also a bit of card draw in there as well. And then 4 copies of Portable Hole. Why? How come you're playing the 4 copies of Portable Hole? Obviously, it's a very good removal spell. Things like Bowmasters could potentially be an issue for you. Frog as well is a good one to take up by this. But specifically, why 4 copies of Portable Hole in this meta?
Yeah, so the Portable Holes themselves aren't really like a meta card. It's more of like, I wouldn't say the core of the deck, because I do, see a future where I go down on the card, but it's still like a structural part of the deck where it enables Metalcraft. It's a 1 mana removal, killing the problematic, Orcish Bowmasters and Frogs, but also it's a artifact that's able to be flashed back with Emery, and that's something I value quite a lot. since this deck you actually mill cards quite a lot through like Emery triggers, through Narset discarding your hand, through Surveillance, but also like through Ascendancy. So like it being an artifact, being able to be flashed back with Emery is quite relevant. So that hence the portable hole. And Aether Spellbomb, it's cantrip to flip Tameo. It's a removal spell off of Saga, but also there's lines where you bounce your Emery when your opponent tries to interact with your combo, and then you just replay the Emery equipped Corey and then keep comboing that way. So it's also a form of protection.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So
Sorcery
yeah, that's sort of like the
sorcery speed fatal push. It looks like.
Yeah.
It also hits Corey Steelcutter.
Yeah. So that's sort of like the main bulk of the deck. Anything you want to add about the land base? It looks like a very generic sort of mana base. You've got your sagas in there. You're only playing 3. Well, I'm going to ask you why you're only 3 in a minute. But it's very generic. You've got your Thundering Falls to mill your to sort of have card selection. Pretty much every deck is playing some sort of archive sort of card. But you've also playing a copy of Otawara. Is again, I presume it's just utility. So, how come only 3 Ursa Saga? Is that just enough? Is it or?
Yeah. So, unlike Breach, where Saga was a lot of times a 4 of, though like at the last moments of Breach, with like so much hate going around, people actually went down to 3 Saga to play around, Wrath of the Skies, Weretes, Raven Charms. But in that deck, Saga was more of a 4 of, because there was a lot of like sequences of play Saga on 1, fetch the 0 drops on turn 3, and then combo off like that. This deck, you don't really play Saga on 1 besides certain matchups, which I'll get into later. And the other issue is that with Narset and Jeskai Ascendancy being so like constraining on the mana pips, as well as like, for example, Corey plus Tameo or Corey plus Portable Holes, like this deck has quite a rough mana restriction, whilst also giving us a lot of ways to spend our mana every turn, like Narset flashing back, Tameo clues, repeals, etc. So I just felt that Saga is kind of like a luxury spell, though it's super strong. Hence, I'm playing 3, but the mana pip is what is holding it from it being a 4 of. I do know that a notable Japanese pro and the Magic Online Championship runner-up Triosk, Yuki Ichikawa, played 4 copies, but he's actually playing 1 more land, just really solidifying the view of Saga is more of a spell rather than the mana base. Odawara is actually the card I'm most likely to be cutting from the deck at the moment. Like, you'd assume, like with Emery, Narset, and Tameo, you'd be able to channel it for really cheap. But there's a few problems to this, and one of them is that with Narset, you discard your hand, so it's harder to leave up. The other one is that with 4 Ambers in play, most of the time Amber is just Mox Sapphire, tapping for blue. So like, there's a problem of you having too many blue mana and not being able to use that blue mana effectively. Like, for example, post board, when you board in like Flage, Odawara's Island, Mox Amber, does not cast Flage very well. Let me tell you that. So, it being hard to channel like more than I thought, and the mana colors actually is prompting me to go away from Odawara to play like maybe an extra fetch land, another shock land maybe, or Yuki actually played Spiral Bluff Canal, since you want to play a blue-red land on 1 to be able to first play your Tameo or Emery, and then turn 2 play Saga into Corey. So some sort of blue-red, or like minimum a fetch land, or like a dual land is gonna be the replacement here.
Yeah, I can see that. I quite like that because I'm a fan of Ottawa. I play Ottawa in a lot of my decks, and there's the times when it feels really good. Sort of, I guess what am I trying to say? The times when it feels really good sort of clouds your judgment on how well a card is, and I think Ottawa is one of those cards. Like Ottawa are saving the game there, and then when it actually comes to it, actually, it's probably one of the most flexible cards in your land base.
Yeah, it's a recognition bias thing, right? You realize less the time Odawara loses you rather than wins you the game. So,
yeah. Dan, do you just want to go through the sideboard with Myra and just question about certain things? Because I know you had you had a very interesting or you showed some interest in a specific card in the sideboard. Myra, you are working on a sideboard plan at the moment, and once that's completed, where we will post that on battlechads. Usually, we add a sideboard plan to the show notes. We will add that once it's made. But we'll also attach your social media and all that sort of stuff in the show notes so people can actually proactively look for that guide. But there will be a guide coming. Obviously, the ins and outs. We're not going to talk about the ins and outs against certain matchups on this pod, but we are going to talk about why you've chosen these sideboard cards, were the good, and your inclusion there. So, Dan, if you want to just lead on the first one there.
Yeah, so first of all, 2 copies of Chandra's Defeat. This is brought back a lot of memories just from the Pioneer season last year towards sort of this time last year now. Like with Mono Red, Wizards just being so strong, you were just seeing like lots of decks just running it just to deal with it. So why are you bringing this into Modern, Myra? Why 2 copies of Chandra's Defeat?
Yeah, so in general with this deck, I found out that you're very prone to overboarding. Like, there's not the type of deck where you want to bring in like, I don't know, like 6-7 cards just because they're good in the matchup. Like, you still want to keep like the core of the deck intact, so you don't have dysfunctional hands.
Yeah.
So in return, the way I've built my sideboard is like a lot of hammers in sort of certain matchups. For example, like Chandra's Defeat, you're only gonna be bringing it in mostly against the prowess decks, the blue-red prowess decks. But it's the best card against them, just because one, it's reliable even when you're on the draw turn 1, which Unholy Heat is not, because Delirium takes time to build up towards. And unlike Galv Blast, similar issue, but even if you have Galv Blast on from turn 1, the play pattern of like a Swift Spear with a mutagenic growth, or like a Delirious Channeler with mutagenic growth, these like mutagenic growth basically always pushes the creatures to be like 4 or 5 toughness, and Chandra's Defeat just makes sure you're able to kill the creatures on top of through the mutagenic growth. So hence the inclusion.
Okay, that makes sense.
So smart. Smart.
Because I know Sam, when we were looking through the list before we started recording, before you joined the voice chat, it's like 2 Chandra's Defeat. It doesn't even kill Flage. So,
I was googling every Chandra. I was googling every Chandra to see if any Chandra's seen play in modern history recently, and I was like, "There's got to be something I'm missing." But of course, it's something very simple which I've overlooked. That's a very, very smart way of looking at it.
So the next card in your sideboard is pretty self-explanatory. 4 copies of Consign to Memory. Pretty sure like any deck that's running blue has 4 copies of them, just as stock now. So we'll just skip over Consign. It's good against Eldrazi. That's all a lot of people need to know. But it can just be incidentally good against a lot of other decks, like Titan, for example. So the next one, if my Moxield will let me hover over it, is Flame of Anor. Go on, tell us what the card does, Myra. It's not showing up. There we go.
So Flame of Anor, one of my favorite cards from the Breach era, but it's a card that lets you choose 2 modes rather than 1 if you control a wizard upon casting. So even if they kill your wizard while this is on the stack, you're still getting the value. It reads that target player draws 2 cards, destroy an artifact, or deal 5 damage to a creature. Basically, this card gives a lot of the resiliency to the deck post board. A lot of times post board, you might not be able to spam spells as much with Narset in play because maybe your opponent brought in Deafening Silence, or maybe like your artifacts and enchantments are heavily taxed with the cards like Wear and Tear and Wrath of the Skies. So Flame of Anor not only interacts with your opponents while pushing you up ahead on cards, but also helps you play like a control role with Tameo, where you play a Tameo, you Flame of Anor, kill something, draw 2 cards, flip Tameo, and then work your way towards the ultimate, or just rebind back Flame of Anor to continue the value train like that. I really like Flame of Anor, particularly right now in the meta, just because cards like Wear and Tear are kind of hard to bring in against Prowess, where like Ori is such a strong card, but you don't want blanks against like their normal creature draw.
Yeah.
And Flame of Anor just gives us a very good way of dealing with Corey Steelcutter while also interacting with the other parts of the deck. Like places where you would bring Flame of Anor, where it's not intuitive, is like, of course, Corey against the Prowess decks, against the mirror match, against Energy, but also against like Titan, because their sideboard plan kind of consists of like Collector Oath. So you kill Collector Oath, kill the Amulet, or like kill Collector Oath, draw 2 cards.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a lot of utility. You even bring it in against like Eldrazi, since it enables Tameo control so well. So Flame of Anor, very good card, very, very, very solid.
Yeah, it's insane.
I love Flame of Anor. I love Flame of Anor.
Especially when you're running, eight wizards and you made that between Tameo and Emery. Mind you, is Emery even a wizard? Am I? Yeah, Murphy wizard.
Emery's a wizard. Is Narset a wizard?
No,
or is Narset a monk?
No, human monk.
Oh, so close.
Would have been so good.
Yeah. So a lot of things you do, like, is that you make sure you hold your Tameo or Emery until you have like 4 mana. So you can like ensure of getting the Flame of Anor value. That's also something you do sometimes.
That's fine. That's great. And then even if like they go to push your Tameo, you can just flip it and say, "Ah, gotcha. Take this. Draw 2." Next card on the list, again, if Moxfield lets me hover over it, is Orim's Chant, just as a one-off.
Yeah, so I said previously that counter spells and like reactive cards don't really work well with the deck. But I was like looking through a lot of different options against cards I could bring in against Storm and Titan, which I would say is a tricky matchup because they go over the top of you and they're also very fast.
Yeah.
And the problem with this deck is that unlike a lot of decks, for example, Energy, that can play like Damping Spheres or Deafening Silence, those cards are like symmetrical, so it hits you as well. So that's a problem. Hence, I'm playing the Orim's Chant. I can see like 1 or 2 copies, maybe 3 sometimes, but probably just 1 or 2. It's not a card I'm particularly excited about, but you've got utility in your own turn. It's 1 mana, so it's easy to hold up. So I gave it the passing grades, but not too excited about it.
Next card on the list is one of the possibly outside of Corey Steelcutter, one of the best red cards ever printed in Flash Titan of Fire's Fury. Just the next evolution from the Elder Giant rotation that Wizards have been doing through Croxer and Euro. You've got 2 copies. It's very, very solid. You're filling your graveyard up very, very quick. You want to go into it a bit more?
Yeah, so a lot of times, like against fair decks, against like Energy, against Prowess, you win a lot of the game ones through Ascendancy combo because they have like very few ways of interacting with enchantments. And if you hold your Emery until they tap out, their removal don't really hit it. So you win a lot of the game ones through Ascendancy.
Yeah.
But unlike Breach, Ascendancy is mostly a liability post board because it's 3 mana that gets potentially traded by 1 mana spells like where. Hence, I wanted a way to close the game without 1, clumping in my hand, and 2, being really vulnerable to my opponent's interaction. So that's why I chose Flage. It's basically to finish a post board when we morph into like a prowess control deck rather than a combo deck. Like, you mentioned this deck has a lot of ways to fill up the graveyard or mill. So you're able to escape Flage quite well. A little tricky to cast because you have like sagas and you have the islands.
Yeah.
But if you like make sure you hold on to like Moxes, or you float mana with Mox Amber while the Flage sacrifice triggers on the stack, letting you floating red or white, also helps you, escape Flage. So it's a good Flage deck, especially like you can equip Corey Steelcutter on it and just give it a haste and trample.
Now we're talking.
Ooh.
It's like almost like Arena of Glory in.
Yeah, Glory at home.
A great analogy. I was gonna say, like, Flage, just looking at your list again, it looks not impossible, but very, very hard to cast, like you said, with the Urza Sagas and the Mox Ambers primarily tapping for blue most of the time. But if you can make it work, why not? Why not give it a shot? Next card, you're an Urza Saga deck, so you've got another tutorable card through the Urza Saga third chapter in Shadowspear. It's just a great all-around card. You alluded to in like Hammered, like the deck being very, very similar. Personally, I think you should just put 4 Colossal Hammers in this deck and then force the Garderzade and you'd be golden. I'm joking. But go on. What about Shadowsphere? What's this got into? Why is it in your sideboard?
Yeah, similarly to Flage, a lot of the ways we also win against energy or prowess is by making like a 5/5 construct token and then equipping Shadowspear and beating down like that. So essentially similar roles, except this one's tutorable, hence the inclusion. I actually wanted to play a main deck since the game plan of equipping Saga tokens on Shadowspear is much more reliable against like energy and prowess game 1 when they don't have like the shatter effect or Wrath of the Skies. But I prioritized Pithing Needle to have a better matchup against decks like Frog and Belcher. So that's like the trade-off I made. I still think post-board Shadowspear is still excellent, hence I included it, but I can't fault anyone for playing that main deck.
Yeah, makes sense. Great card. 2 Warranters, we've alluded to it in the past, where it's really, really good in the mirror. It's good against it's just good against a lot of the meta at the minute. Maybe not so much the blue-red prowess deck, which we touched on in the past because you don't want to bring it in. Just before we get your explanation, so I was playing blue-red prowess the other day at just FNM. And I was against Red-Green Eldrazi Ramp, and he had a Talisman and a Utopia Sprawl out in play. And then he had is it Ugin's Labyrinth, the new Soul Land from Modern Horizons. He had a Sire of 7 Deaths underneath it. So he taps it in my end phase, and I go, in response, I'm going to wear into your Utopia Sprawl and your Talisman now, so you cannot cast that very, very scary card that you've just picked back up. And he draws, well, we have a joke, say, now I can't cast it. And he draws none other than a Eldrazi Temple, so he just slams that on the battlefield, and then I just proceed to quickly lose that game. Anyway, I'm not the guest. Please, Myra, 2 Wear and Tears. What's happening with 2 Wear and Tears?
Yeah, so Wear and Tear is just a hammer against like the artifact enchantment deck, but very importantly, it's very low in mana cost. It's 1 or 2 mana, or like if you fuse it's 3, but it's cheap, so it helps you like keep the chain of casting spells going more easily. And as a sideboard option, I really like Wear and Tear. Like you said, there's application in like the Eldrazi matchups. There's application in actually Boros Energy. I board in like 1 copy, to, kill potential deafening silences, but more importantly, bombardment. So there's like utility there, and yeah, just overall a great card. I can see playing 3 copies as well.
Fair enough. And then last card in your 75. Again, when it loads, Moxfield has been very, very weird tonight. Is Whip Flare. There we go. There it is.
Yep. There we go.
On.
Yeah, Whip Flare, it's a pyroclasm effect. You don't bring it in against Prowess because they can dodge this very, very easily.
Yeah.
But against Boros Energy, it's a card that helps us catch up from behind. I can see playing more copies of it. Yeah, so it's overall a very good card. And I'm not too worried about it killing my own stuff. Because a lot of times, you've already got a value off of Emery. Your monk tokens are gonna probably dodge it because you can cast more spells before that to pump it. But yeah, it's to keep my Boros Energy opponents honest.
Yeah,
fair enough.
It's hard to do that.
So by the looks of it, sliding quite heavily into Boros Energy. Throwing one Werther, one Whip Flare, Shadow Spear, and then 2 Flages just for the Boros Energy matchup. Is it that bad of a matchup for you?
To be honest, I do think it's quite a bad matchup post board.
Yeah.
Game 1, I win it quite a lot, but if I drop it, I'm very, very, very scared. Basically, just like this deck in a vacuum, this deck I would kind of like describe it as a deck that can present both rock and paper. Whilst other deck can only present like rock, paper, scissor. So it's able to change depending what your opponent is presenting. But the weakness to this is that if your opponent post board is also a deck that's able to present both like a rock and a scissor, then it gets tricky because their hammer is gonna line up better against yours because you being like a artifact deck, you have more inherent weakness. And whilst like Boros Energy can morph into this aggro control deck, not a mid-range deck, aggro control deck, where they can present a very fast board, like very threatening board of Guide Ocelot, forcing you to interact. And then in the mid-game, when you try and catch back up, they'll try and like wrath your board or wear and tear your board. And then once the dust has settled, like Arena Flage is now suddenly very menacing. Like even a top deck Guide Ocelot will rebuild very quickly for them. So basically, when it's like these hybrid decks against hybrid decks, usually it's like which deck is more resilient, which deck has more hammer against the other wins. And Boros Energy is just more resilient than our deck is. So in that sense, I do find the energy matchup hard.
Are there any other decks you wish to avoid then? And then similarly, are there any really good like matchups that you just want to see all day?
Yeah, so that's the thing about this deck. It's so new that it's quite tricky to evaluate all the matchups because you're not quite sure whether it's your opponent's boarding wrong or whether it's like the matchup being good. For example, like the first challenge I top 4 with this deck, I played against Rastaff, Ginger, both on energy and beat both of them.
Yeah.
But, Ginger wasn't drawing amazingly, and Rastaff was kind of either like screwed on lands, flooding, or I was just dealing with their threats, or they didn't have a lot of sideboard cards against me. So I would say a lot of the matchups need to be confirmed or to be determined.
Yeah.
But in general, I would say I want to play against decks that are one-dimensional. For example, Eldrazi. For example, Belcher. For example, like energy with not a lot of hammers. Prowess to a certain degree. And I don't want to play against either energy with a lot of hammers, Amulet Titan, or Storm. So that's the matchup spread.
Yeah, you'll probably see especially going Axion, and this is this weekend coming up. We're going this pod. We've got Axion in the UK coming up, and I always guarantee there'll be Storm and Amulet. There always is. No matter what, like people just love to play those decks, particularly in paper. So I sort of want to like move towards ending this pod now. And is there anything about this deck specifically you want to add, Myra, or any questions you want to ask lads to Myra in reference to this deck?
It's a good question because it's a deck with a lot of moving pieces. One thing, and you don't have to answer this because it's a bit of a loaded question, Myra. So if you want to, stay silent, I'll allow it this once. But I really struggle playing against a deck like this because, as you just mentioned in the good matchups at the moment in Modern, I'm on a bit of Belcher action. And the one thing I always struggle about approaching a deck like this is your deck is almost constructed like a grandfather clock or something that's quite intricate. It's a lot of individual moving pieces that sort of assemble together for a bit of a masterpiece or a bit of an explosion at the end, right? So if I want to tackle this deck, let's say, without the access to Sideboard cards, I sit down in my RCQ or in an Axion event, and round one, I'm against Jeskai Ascendancy. Is there a particular way I can navigate a game or attack this deck game one that can sort of disassemble that clock? Or is it just not really possible game one?
So that's an amazing question, but I actually have an answer for you.
Nice.
But I would say this goes both ways. Also for like the listeners playing this deck, it's also an important tip when playing this deck against other decks. But similar to like mid-range decks where you morph into different decks, whether like into an aggro deck or a control deck against certain matchups. When playing decks that have multiple game plans, like in Magic in general, you want to understand the avenue your opponent's deck is weak against. For example, against like a clock permission-y blue tempo deck, you don't want to play a combo game against them because combo requiring certain cards being played together by spending mana at sorcery speed at most times is weak against counterspells and cheap threats. Whereas like a affinity style game plan where you just dump your hand and generate value on the battlefield, or an aggro deck where you trade down on mana against like opposing counterspells, and while pressing your board advantage against their one cheap creature, is the way you beat clock permission decks. And it's things like that you have to understand, either playing against the deck or playing with the deck. So like for your example here, you're struggling against this deck against Belcher. Okay, what sort of deck is Belcher? Belcher is a combo control deck where it utilizes creatures to dig towards your counterspells or your combo pieces, and you utilize counterspells to get to your combo turns and then combo off.
Yep.
So the bad matchup Belcher has, for example, like Amulet Titan, or for example Blue-Red Prowess, are decks faster than you with good interaction. For example, Amulet will interact against you through Boseiju and collect wave. And then Prowess will have a strong board backed up by a counterspell. So as a Belcher player, you want to avoid the Jeskai Corey player to be a pseudo Prowess deck with Corey's plus Repeal backup, or Corey's plus Pithing Needle, or them playing a Saga mid-range game where they develop a strong board with Saga backed up by the Pithing Needle they bring in. Whereas you want them to actually play a combo game because that walks into your counterspell better.
Yeah, that's an absolute trap of a question, because if I bump into this weekend, I'm hoping it goes a little bit different to how I went in Bologna. So I've written that all down, and well, thank you very much. You still probably trounced me, because one thing we didn't say earlier, is I got absolutely annihilated in Bologna. But yeah, I hope to bump into you this weekend, Myra. So thanks for that information. That's everything from me. I think that's a great rundown of the deck.
Yeah, definitely. So before, when was it? Before MH3 last year, I had sort of like the older version of this deck in a folder somewhere on my computer, and I was looking at it, and I was playtesting it on Moxiel. I was like, this deck's got potential. I really like this deck. I'm going to build it. At the time, I had a couple of copies of Ragavan. It didn't have Tameo. Obviously, Mox Opal wasn't legal, so it was a bit more clunkier. It ran, I want to say Rona, the other legendary, where it's like 2 mana, 1/3, tap it, draw a card, discard a card.
Yeah.
So it ran that along with the other 0 mana and Springleaf Drums and Urza Saga. So it still had sort of like the bulk of what this deck that we're showing to everyone now, just without all of these absolutely cracked new cards like Tameo, like Corey Steelcutter, like Flage out of the sideboard. So it's definitely eye-opening, and it's making me really want to spend a small fortune on Mox Opals and Urza Sagas.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the strength of this deck, like I said a lot of times before, is the ability to morph. And I believe that that's the strength of this Narset version, having over the traditional, 4 Ascendancy version, where it's more forced into play a combo game.
Yeah.
So I would just say, everyone, it's too late on Corey Steelcut, I'm sorry. But go and buy your Narsets now. It's absolutely amazing. And there's so many people that says, why are you playing Narset? Just play more copy of Ascendancy. It does nothing. Trust me, it does a lot, and it does everything. And it's exactly what the deck wants. It's a time twister. It's an aggressive body. It's a legend turning on your Mox. It's just everything. So go get your Narsets now. And yeah, I hope all of you guys might be interested in playing this deck, playing against this deck. And I'll be, trying to finish my guide as fast as I can. So definitely check out for that.
Myra, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your expertise, sharing some of your insights into this new and exciting deck. And we will be, as a battlechads podcast, we will be exploring Modern in the next pod. Doing a sort of like better breakdown, what we think is good, etc. Potentially in the wake of Axion, and we've had a few good results in Modern as a team recently. So thank you for bringing this deck on, and thank you for coming on the podcast. Are there any social media shout outs you want to give out for the listeners? We will be posting all any socials you want to be posting into the show notes. Anything to do with sponsors, anything like we'll add it wherever we want. We'll have the conversation afterwards. But is there anything you want to shout out, you want to do right now?
Yeah, so firstly, I want to shout out everyone's favorite, Andrea Mengucci senpai, for recommending this deck. I wouldn't have played it out if it wasn't for him saying, oh, this deck is very good, try it out.
Yeah.
So definitely go check his Twitch, check his YouTube, check his Twitter out. He is absolutely the nicest person you would meet in the Magic scene, and just overall a great friend and a teammate. Also, I wanted to thank Ben Katz on X. He's at Ride the Iguana with capital R, T, and I. And he's the original deck builder of this Repeal Narset version. And I just wanted to thank him for the idea. And it's been an honor for me to, play this deck, write guides, and help me come across this awesome deck post Breach ban. Other than that, my Twitter is Myra00_MTG. So please check that out. Big shout outs to, you guys, the Battle Chads and the Chat Magic guys. Also, big thank you to Team Worldly Council for always supporting, testing, and just being an awesome community and team for me. It's been an honor to play with them. And, you've had Sean that's, moved to Cosmos, but always at heart a Worldly Council senpai. So, absolutely big shout outs to all of them. I wouldn't be the Magic player I am today without them. And last but not least, thank you so much to UltraPRO, our sponsor, as well as go check out their awesome sleeves, the Apex sleeves. They're my absolute favorites, and I'm sure
really
they will be your absolute favorites as well.
I actually just sleeved up. I'm a big Legacy player. Like Legacy is my main format, and I've been smashed out of Legacy recently. And I wanted to feel something, so I sleeved my Infect deck back up for Legacy, and I used the the Apex sleeves and that. And I was just like, oh, this feels so nice. But I want to mirror what you said about. I've only met Andrea Mangucci a couple of times, and one of the times we were drunk in a Korean barbecue spot in Las Vegas, and he probably doesn't remember me because he was absolutely like he was drunk. I nearly swear worded then. Yeah, and it was just funny. Anyway, thank you, Myra. Lads, any closing things before I finish this? Sam, do you want to do the obvious?
The like, share, and subscribe if you're
do
watching.
that. Yeah,
Sure, I'll do that. Like, share, and subscribe if you're watching. Wherever you watch us or check us out, please give us a follow, give us a subscribe, share it with your friends. And, links buttons are everywhere. This is the first time I've been allowed to do this and probably the last time. So, yeah, please go and do that.
There will be a giveaway when we reach 500 subs. We will be giving away a set of... In fact, I'm going to reveal it now. It's right on my desk. Give me a second.
It's Josh's Legacy Infect deck.
No, it's not. We're actually going to be giving away a set of Sultai UltraPRO Apex sleeves, as well as the matching deck box as well. Nice. So once we hit the 500 subs, we'll send out information on that. And soon we will be doing listener questions or listener comments, so you can actually post your questions and comments into an online form, and we will have a segment at the end of our main podcast in the week. So thanks everybody for listening. Thanks guys for coming on, and Myra, thank you very much, and I will see you this weekend.
See you this weekend.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.